Welcome to Boring History Relaxation Channel. Tonight we step onto a wave-soaked rock in the middle of a winter sea, where a lighthouse rises through darkness like a pale finger pointing at the clouds. You taste salt on your lips. Rain creeps down your collar. The wind pushes at your back with the enthusiasm of someone trying to remove you from the island entirely. Far above, the lantern turns, sending a calm beam across water that is behaving with absolutely no calm at all. Somewhere inside the tower, a keeper is preparing for bed. This seems optimistic. You probably won't survive this, but at least the lighthouse keeper has left a dry blanket nearby. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You can also share your location and local time in the comments, especially if you're listening somewhere warm, quiet, and suspiciously free of Atlantic spray. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the bottom of a narrow landing stair while the sea crashes behind you. Reaching the lighthouse has already taken most of the day. Several layers of clothing and nearly all your confidence. The keeper who meets you does not look impressed. To him, your dramatic arrival is simply Tuesday. His face is red from wind and cold. His beard holds tiny drops of water. He grips your arm and guides you away from the slippery edge without ceremony. There is no time for elegant greetings when one poorly placed boot can send a visitor into water cold enough to make every life decision feel questionable. Many historic lighthouses stand on headlands, islands, reefs, or isolated rocks because their purpose is to warn ships away from danger. That means the keepers often live precisely where winter weather is most exposed. The tower must remain visible to sailors, which is wonderfully useful for navigation, and slightly less useful for anyone hoping to hide from a storm. You follow the keeper toward the entrance. The door is not placed at ground level. It sits above the rock, reached by steep steps or a short iron ladder. This raised entrance protects the interior from waves that sweep across the base during violent weather. It also ensures that carrying supplies inside feels like an entrance examination designed by a staircase. A barrel of fuel waits below, so do sacks of coal, preserved food, fresh water, spare rope, lamp equipment, and a wooden crate that may contain tools or biscuits. You silently hope for biscuits. The keeper silently hopes you are strong enough to lift coal. Winter preparation begins long before the worst storms arrive. Supplies must be delivered while boats can still approach safely. On remote stations, a delayed relief vessel may leave keepers isolated for weeks longer than planned. Food is chosen because it lasts. Salt meat, dried beans, flour, oats, tea, coffee, and hard biscuits become familiar companions. Fresh vegetables are less dependable. A cabbage may survive for a while in a cool storeroom, though it gradually develops the personality of an old boot. Potatoes keep better if protected from damp and frost. Eggs may be preserved in lime water. Butter can be salted. Nothing is wasted because the nearest shop is currently somewhere beyond a wall of black water. Inside, the air changes. The wind becomes a deep vibration rather than a direct attack. You hear water strike stone outside, but the thick walls swallow part of the impact. The entrance door closes behind you with a heavy wooden thud. For the first time since landing, your coat stops trying to leave your body. The lower room smells of wet wool, lamp oil, smoke, rope, and cooked porridge. It is not a luxurious fragrance, but it is warmer than the ocean. A small stove gives off a steady heat. Damp gloves hang nearby. Boots stand in a row, each pair looking as if it has recently lost an argument with the sea. The keeper checks the door bolts twice. Not because he is nervous, he explains, but because a loose door in a gale can become a very energetic problem. Windows are small and strongly fitted. Shutters may be closed when flying spray or debris threatens the glass. Every object has a place, partly for neatness and partly because unsecured objects tend to explore the room during storms. You place your bag on a bench. The keeper moves it immediately into a corner. He has seen what happens when visitors leave luggage beside a walkway. Darkness, exhaustion, and narrow stairs can turn an innocent bag into a professional assassin. Above you, the tower rises in stacked rooms. Storage occupies the lower levels. Living spaces sit higher. The lamp room waits at the top, reached by a spiral staircase that seems determined to test both your knees and your sense of direction. The keeper climbs it several times each day and night. The lighthouse light is not simply switched on and forgotten. In the era of oil lamps, keepers clean glass, trim wicks, refill reservoirs, inspect mechanisms, and remove soot. Later systems using pressurized vapor or electric lamps reduce some labor, but constant attention remains essential. The light is a promise to sailors, and the keeper's sleep must fit around that promise. Tonight, the weather threatens to become severe. The keeper reads the signs without consulting any modern forecast. He watches the direction of the wind, he studies the clouds, he notices the falling pressure on the barometer. He listens to the sound of waves breaking against distant rocks. A quirky belief among some coastal communities holds that certain seabirds flying inland predict storms. Other keepers trust aching joints, unusual halos around the moon, or the behaviour of cats. The lighthouse cat, naturally, refuses to clarify its meteorological qualifications. It merely sits near the stove and looks disappointed in everyone. Historians still argue whether keepers relied more heavily on formal instruments or local weather traditions at the most isolated stations. Written logbooks emphasize measured wind, pressure, and visibility, but daily decisions may also depend on habits passed from one keeper to another. You are shown the station log. Its pages record wind strength, sea conditions, passing vessels, fuel use, repairs, and unusual events. The handwriting is careful. Even during storms, the keeper documents what happens. A calm sentence such as heavy seas over landing may describe a night in which the entire building trembles and nobody dares open the door. This restrained language feels almost humorous. Modern visitors might write 12 emotional messages and take a blurry photograph. The keeper writes 6 words, checks the lamp, and puts more coal on the stove. A sudden impact shakes the room. You freeze. A cup rattles on the table. The keeper continues slicing bread. It is only a large wave striking the lower rock, he says. You wait for him to add something reassuring. He does not. Instead, he gives you a bowl of stew and points toward a chair secured against the wall. Outside, evening disappears quickly. The windows turn black except when the lantern beam sweeps past, briefly whitening the rain. The tower creaks. The stove ticks softly as metal expands. Far above, the lens mechanism continues its measured rotation. You begin to understand that sleep here does not depend on silence. Silence is unavailable. Sleep depends on preparation, familiarity, routine, and the solid knowledge that the building has endured storms before. Your wet clothes steam near the stove. Warm food settles heavily in your stomach. The keeper checks the clock, then glances upward toward the lantern. There are hours of work remaining before anyone reaches a bed. The storm gathers around the tower, testing stone, glass, iron, and nerves. Yet inside, every bolt is fastened, every lamp tool is ready, and every task follows an order practiced many times. You sit deeper in the chair as the wind rises, and the lighthouse begins its long winter night. The tower around you feels less like a house, and more like a patient stone animal crouched against the sea. Its walls do not merely surround the rooms, they carry weight, absorb vibration, resist water, and quietly remind you that comfort was never the first priority. You place one palm against the masonry. The surface is cool, slightly damp and rough beneath your fingers. Even with a stove burning nearby, the stone seems to keep a private memory of winter. It has spent the day facing wind and spray, and it has no intention of pretending otherwise. Many traditional lighthouse towers are built with walls that are especially thick near the base. Some taper as they rise, creating a broad, heavy foundation below and a narrower lantern platform above. This shape helps the structure resist powerful winds while lowering the centre of gravity. It also gives the tower the appearance of a giant stone candle, though lighting the top requires considerably more paperwork. The lower courses may be cut from granite or other durable local stone. Blocks are fitted tightly, often with careful joints designed to prevent water from forcing its way inside. In exposed locations, builders understand that a small weakness is not likely to remain small. The sea is patient, persistent, and apparently available for inspection work at all hours. You climb a few steps and notice how the staircase follows the inner curve of the wall. Each level is compact, with little wasted space. The rounded shape is not decorative. A circular tower allows wind to flow around it instead of striking a flat surface directly. Gusts still push and howl, but they find fewer corners to seize. Stone alone is not enough. Iron cramps, bolts, tie rods, and metal fittings bind parts of the structure together. Wooden beams may support floors, but critical joints receive additional reinforcement. Builders choose materials according to the location, available transport, and the kind of weather expected. On a remote rock, every block, beam, tool, and barrel must arrive by boat, which means construction begins with logistics and continues with mild despair. The keeper shows you a seam in the wall where repairs have been made. The mortar is newer, slightly different in colour. Salt water has a talent for finding tiny cracks. Once inside, moisture can freeze, expand, and slowly widen them. Maintenance is constant because the lighthouse does not become finished in the ordinary sense. It becomes temporarily satisfied. A major historical fact becomes obvious as you study the tower. Famous offshore lighthouses, such as the Eddystone Towers, were repeatedly redesigned because early structures struggled against fire, weather, and waves. Later stone designs used interlocking masonry to create stronger resistance. The principle resembles a puzzle in which every piece must hold its neighbours in place, except the penalty for losing is considerably worse than discovering a missing corner piece under the sofa. You listen as another wave strikes the base. The impact travels upward through the building. It is not a sharp bang now. It becomes a deep, muffled thump, followed by a faint trembling in the floor. The wall spreads the force through its mass. Instead of allowing one weak point to take the full shock, the structure distributes the pressure. The keeper hardly reacts. He can tell the difference between ordinary movement and dangerous movement. A familiar vibration passes through the tower like a low note from a distant drum. An unfamiliar one would bring him to his feet immediately. You ask whether the whole lighthouse ever sways. A little, he says. His answer is not especially helpful. Tall towers can move slightly under strong wind. Complete stiffness is not always desirable, because rigid materials may crack if they cannot yield at all. The motion is usually subtle, but in extreme weather a keeper may feel it through a hanging lamp, a shifting flame, or water moving inside a cup. This is not the kind of bedtime mobile anyone requests. The walls also help control temperature, though not always comfortably. Thick masonry changes temperature slowly. During winter, it can protect the interior from sudden cold gusts, but once chilled, it remains cold for a long time. Rooms closest to the stove feel tolerable. Corners farther away become storage areas for objects that do not complain. Condensation forms where warm indoor air touches cold stone. Keepers wipe damp surfaces, air bedding when weather permits, and guard supplies against mildew. Books curl at the edges, metal tools rust. Clothing develops that permanent maritime scent of wool, smoke, salt, and determination. In some stations, inner wooden linings are added to improve warmth and reduce dampness. A narrow space between wood and stone can create insulation, though it also provides hiding places for insects, dust, and the occasional mouse with excellent waterfront property. One quirky tidbit concerns lighthouse walls marked with penciled notes, scratched dates, or tiny personal symbols left by keepers and builders. These marks may record repairs, names, weather events, or simple boredom. A person living inside the same curved rooms for years sometimes feels compelled to leave proof that he existed there. even if the proof says only painted this door beside a date nobody celebrates. Historians still argue whether the greatest strength of many historic lighthouses comes mainly from brilliant engineering principles or from conservative overbuilding. Some towers use enormous amounts of stone because calculations are limited and builders prefer excess weight to uncertainty. In practice, careful design and generous mass often work together. You continue upward and reach a narrow window set deep into the wall. The opening looks almost like a tunnel. Glass sits far from both the interior and exterior surfaces because the masonry between them is so thick. During calm weather, this window offers a clean view of the horizon. Tonight it offers a view of moving darkness and foam. The frame is heavily secured. Metal shutters can close across vulnerable openings. Some windows face away from the worst prevailing weather, while others remain small to reduce exposure. Large windows would provide more light inside, but they would also invite more wind, more water, and more opportunities for the sea to redecorate. The tower's door receives similar attention. Heavy timber, iron straps, thick hinges, and strong bolts turn a simple entrance into a defensive object. The doorway may be recessed to shield it from direct force. On extremely exposed stations, access is placed high enough that waves passing over the rock cannot easily strike it. You imagine trying to leave during the storm. The keeper notices your expression and says nobody opens the outer door unless necessary. He says this with the calm tone of a man explaining that soup should remain in the bowl. The base of the tower may be shaped to break or redirect waves. Some lighthouses rise directly from sloping rock, while others sit on carefully prepared foundations cut into the surface. Builders remove loose material, create level beds, and anchor the first stones securely. The foundation must resist not only downward weight, but also sideways pressure and repeated impact. Sea spray climbs the outside in sheets. Water runs downward along the curved wall instead of collecting on broad ledges. Projections are kept limited because anything sticking out can catch wind or waves. Decorative architecture receives little encouragement. The ocean has always been a harsh critic of unnecessary trim. Inside, the storm becomes filtered through layers of stone. You still hear it, but the sound loses its sharpest edges. Wind changes into a low roar. Rain becomes a faint hiss. Waves become pulses you feel through your boots. This filtered noise matters more than you expect. The keeper does not sleep because the storm disappears. He sleeps because the building translates violence into something repetitive. The walls turn chaos into rhythm. You rest your shoulder against the cool curve and feel the next impact move through it. The stone accepts the blow without drama. Iron holds. Mortar grips. Blocks press against one another. The entire tower behaves as one heavy body. Far outside, the sea throws itself forward again and again. Inside, the rooms remain narrow, damp, and stubbornly intact. The lighthouse does not defeat the storm. It simply refuses to move aside. You climb higher into the tower until the air grows warmer. The scent of coal smoke fades into something softer. Dry wood, folded blankets, lamp oil, and freshly brewed tea mingle in the quiet space. The sleeping quarters are not grand. They are not even particularly comfortable by modern standards. Yet after hours of cold wind and endless stone steps, they seem almost luxurious. The keeper pushes open a narrow wooden door. The room beyond is scarcely larger than a modern garden shed. Every inch serves a purpose. A bed occupies one side. A small table stands beneath a tiny window. Shelves hold neatly folded clothing, a Bible, a weather almanac, a few worn books, and a clock whose ticking seems unusually loud. There is no clutter. There cannot be. Living in a lighthouse teaches that unnecessary possessions quickly become unnecessary obstacles. During rough weather, anything left loose may slide, rattle, or fall. Simplicity is not a fashionable decorating style. It is practical survival with a broom. The bed itself appears surprisingly modest. Its frame is heavy enough that it does not shift easily. The mattress is stuffed with materials available during the period, often horsehair, straw, wool, or combinations of natural fibres. None would inspire advertisements promising cloud-like comfort, but they provide insulation and dependable support. The keeper laughs softly when you test the mattress. "You're expecting a hotel," he says. The mattress responds with a creak that sounds mildly offended. Blankets matter more than softness. Thick wool traps heat even when the air inside the room remains chilly. Several layers are folded at the foot of the bed, ready for particularly cold nights. Linen sheets feel crisp against the skin. They are washed whenever fresh water and weather allow, though both can be in frustratingly short supply. Fresh water is precious on isolated stations. Rainwater may be collected in cisterns. Supply boats bring additional barrels when conditions permit. Every bucket carried upstairs represents effort. Nobody wastes water by leaving it running because there is, thankfully, nothing available to run. A small washstand occupies one corner. A ceramic basin sits beside a pitcher. Morning routines require determination during winter. Splashing cold water onto your face certainly wakes you, although perhaps more dramatically than necessary. Many lighthouse keepers sleep fully dressed or nearly so during severe storms. Heavy trousers, thick shirts, wool socks, and warm underlayers allow them to answer urgent calls within moments. Boots are placed beside the bed in exactly the same position every evening. Finding footwear in darkness becomes much easier when it is always waiting faithfully in one place, instead of wandering mysteriously beneath furniture. One historical fact reflects the demanding nature of lighthouse service. Many stations employed multiple keepers who rotated responsibilities so someone remained available throughout the night. Living quarters were therefore designed to accommodate several adults without wasting valuable space. Privacy became a rare luxury. In larger towers, separate bedrooms might exist for the principal keeper and assistants. Smaller stations often require shared sleeping rooms. The arrangement encourages practical cooperation and occasionally enthusiastic discussions about snoring. You notice hooks fixed along the wall. Each hook carries a specific purpose. Wet coats dry there. Hats remain within reach. Oilskins hang where warmth from the stove can gradually remove moisture. Gloves rest upside down so water drains away rather than collecting inside the fingers. The keeper explains that beginning a freezing morning by placing a wet glove onto your hand can permanently improve your appreciation for dry gloves. A narrow chest stands beneath the window. Inside are spare socks, carefully folded uniforms, sewing supplies, candles, writing paper, and family letters tied with ribbon. These letters become treasured possessions. Weeks or even months may pass before another boat arrives with fresh mail. You unfold one imaginary letter in your mind. The handwriting speaks of birthdays, village gossip, successful harvests, children learning to read, and neighbours repairing fences. None of it concerns storms. That ordinary news becomes extraordinary because it carries the sound of home into a place surrounded by endless water. The keeper keeps photographs nearby as well. Early photographs gradually become more common during the 19th century. Before then, miniature portraits, sketches, or simple keepsakes serve the same emotional purpose. A small object can make an isolated room feel surprisingly human. Historians still argue whether isolation affected lighthouse keepers more through physical loneliness or through the repetitive routines of daily life. Personal journals reveal different experiences. Some keepers cherish solitude, others count the days until relief arrives. The bedroom window is tiny but carefully positioned. It admits daylight while minimizing heat loss and reducing exposure to violent weather. The deep stone wall around it creates a sheltered recess. You sit there briefly and watch pale foam racing across black water far below. The glass trembles gently in its frame. The keeper barely notices. Instead, he winds the clock. Routine governs nearly every action inside the tower. The same task performed every evening builds confidence during nights when the weather attempts to erase it. Clocks are wound, clothing folded, lamps checked, boots are lined, beds aired whenever sunshine visits. One quirky tradition found at some stations involves placing lavender, dried herbs, or sweet-smelling plants inside bedding or clothing chests. The pleasant scent masks the persistent odour of damp wool and smoke. Whether it truly improves sleep or simply convinces everyone they smell less like wet sheep remains open to interpretation. Tiny details reveal remarkable care. Bed curtains appear in some older sleeping quarters. Heavy fabric surrounding the bed traps warmth while reducing drafts. It creates a private cocoon inside an otherwise shared room. On especially cold nights, closing the curtains around the bed can make a noticeable difference. The ceiling slopes slightly with the shape of the tower. Every curve reminds you that the building serves the light above rather than the bedrooms below. Comfort fits wherever space remains. A candle burns on the bedside table. Its flame dances whenever the tower vibrates beneath another heavy wave. The movement becomes hypnotic. Instead of startling you, the gentle flicker slowly settles into the rhythm of breathing. You notice there are no extravagant decorations, no elaborate carpets, no oversized wardrobes, no polished ballroom mirrors waiting for dramatic entrances. Quite honestly, there is barely enough room for one dramatic entrance. The keeper smiles while repairing a loose button on his coat. Small maintenance jobs fill quiet moments. Clothing must last. Furniture must last. Boots certainly must last. Replacement items may arrive months later than expected if storms interrupt supply vessels. Outside. The wind whistles around the lantern gallery. Inside. Blankets remain neatly folded. A kettle simmers quietly on the stove in the adjoining room. The clock continues its patient ticking. The bedroom teaches an unexpected lesson. Good sleep in a lighthouse does not come from luxury. It comes from order. Every object has its place. Every evening follows familiar habits. Every keeper knows exactly where to reach in darkness without hesitation. The room itself becomes part of the routine, offering predictability while the sea offers none. You lower yourself onto the sturdy bed once more. The mattress creaks politely. The blankets carry lingering warmth from the nearby stove. The stone walls mute the worst of the wind until it resembles distant surf rather than immediate danger. For a brief moment, surrounded by simple furniture and careful preparation, the tiny bedroom feels less like a room inside a lonely tower and more like the safest place on the entire winter coast. You discover that the bed has one important job beyond helping you sleep. It must stay exactly where it belongs while the tower endures another night of relentless weather. At first glance, the bed seems almost disappointingly ordinary. 4 sturdy legs rest on wide wooden floorboards. Thick joints connect the frame. Every piece feels heavier than necessary. Then you realise that almost everything inside the room is heavier than necessary. Weight is reassuring here. The keeper kneels beside the frame and taps one corner with his knuckles. Solid oak answers with a dull sound. He explains that lightweight furniture has very little chance of remaining politely arranged during years of vibration. Damp air and occasional sudden jolts. A substantial bed stays put. A lighter one might decide to begin an unexpected tour of the bedroom. You smile. He does not. Apparently, furniture wandering across the floor is not entirely hypothetical. Historic lighthouse keepers often relied on robust handmade furniture built by local craftsmen. These pieces were designed for durability rather than elegance. Thick timber resisted moisture better than delicate construction, and repairs could often be made using simple tools already stored in the tower. The mattress rests inside a wooden frame with raised sides. The edges prevent it from slowly creeping away after months of use. Even slight movement becomes noticeable when the building vibrates every day. You sit carefully and notice another detail. The bed barely squeaks. The keeper looks satisfied. A noisy bed may sound like a minor inconvenience, but inside a lighthouse, every unnecessary sound blends into an already crowded collection of rattles. Ticking clocks, humming wind, and distant surf. Reducing small noises helps the keeper recognize unusual ones. That unexpected scrape across the floor might signal a loose cupboard. A sharp metallic clink could mean lamp equipment shifting. A strange crack might deserve immediate investigation. Quiet furniture becomes another useful tool. Many sleeping rooms also place the bed against the inner wall rather than directly beneath exposed windows. The thick masonry offers additional shelter from cold drafts. It also creates a comforting sense of protection. Your head rests beside several feet of solid stone instead of thin glass facing an angry ocean. You stretch out beneath the blankets. The ceiling feels close enough to touch. The curved wall beside you seems almost to wrap around the bed. Instead of making the room feel cramped, the shape creates an unexpected feeling of security. The tower embraces its occupants with thousands of carefully fitted stones. Blankets deserve nearly as much attention as the bed itself. Heavy wool remains the favourite material because it continues to insulate even if dampness creeps into the room. Several blankets may be layered according to the season. During especially bitter winters, additional quilts, coats, or spare clothing are sometimes spread over the bed. Nobody worries whether the bedding matches fashionable colours. The Storm has very little interest in interior decorating. A mainstream historical fact helps explain these arrangements. Before reliable central heating became common, bedrooms throughout much of Europe and North America were intentionally kept cooler than living rooms. People relied on blankets, nightcaps, warming pans, and layered bedding instead of trying to heat every corner of a building. Lighthouse keepers follow the same principle. Although their bedrooms occasionally redefine the meaning of cool, the keeper reaches beneath the bed and pulls out a curious metal object with a long handle. It resembles an oversized frying pan with a lid. This is a warming pan before bedtime. Hot coals are placed inside the metal container. The pan is carefully passed between the sheets to remove the biting chill waiting beneath the blankets. Once the bed has warmed, the pan is removed before anyone climbs inside. You immediately decide this is one of humanity's better inventions. You also quietly appreciate that nobody suggests sleeping directly beside glowing coals. Safety remains a constant concern. Open flames never wander carelessly through the tower. Candles stand inside secure holders. Lanterns occupy designated places. Hot ashes are disposed of carefully. Fire poses one of the greatest dangers inside a lighthouse filled with wooden floors, furniture, rope, oil, and valuable equipment. The keeper checks the candle wick before placing it on the bedside table. Even this tiny action follows habit. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is forgotten. The pillow feels firmer than you expect. It contains feathers gathered over many years, though poorer stations may use wool, straw, or other available stuffing. Comfort depends greatly upon local resources and personal preference. You discover that firm pillows become surprisingly acceptable after spending hours carrying coal up narrow stairs. Your standards improve dramatically. A small shelf above the bed holds a pocket watch, spectacles, and a folded handkerchief. Each item occupies exactly the same position every evening. If the keeper wakes suddenly during the night, he reaches without searching. Darkness inside the sleeping room can become complete once the candle is extinguished. Outside, only the rotating lantern sends brief flashes through the tiny window. One quirky practice appears in several accounts from coastal communities. Some keepers tuck sprigs of dried heather, rosemary, or other local plants beneath the mattress. Practical people claim the herbs discourage insects. Romantic neighbours insist they encourage pleasant dreams. The insects never leave written opinions. Historians still argue whether enclosed bunk-style beds used in some remote maritime communities spread mainly because they conserved warmth, or because they offered greater privacy inside crowded living quarters. Both explanations find support in surviving buildings and household records. You notice a wooden peg driven into the wall beside the bed. The keeper hangs tomorrow's clothes there before sleeping. The order never changes. Shirt, trousers, wool sweater, coat, cap, everything waits within easy reach. Even boots receive attention. Their openings face outward so feet slide inside quickly during emergency calls. Damp boots are positioned near enough to the stove to dry gradually, but never so close that leather cracks from excessive heat. A violent gust shakes the tower. The window rattles briefly. The bed remains perfectly still. You almost expect the keeper to comment. Instead, he yawns. Years of experience have taught him which movements deserve concern, and which belong to ordinary winter weather. Familiar vibrations become almost invisible to the mind. The body learns them. The ears learn them. Even sleep learns them. You lie quietly beneath several thick blankets while the room settles once again into silence, interrupted only by the steady ticking of the clock and the distant breathing of the wind. The bed no longer seems like simple furniture. It resembles another carefully engineered tool. Its strength keeps it stable. Its weight keeps it dependable. Its blankets preserve precious warmth. Its arrangement allows immediate movement when duty calls. Inside these modest wooden rails, countless lighthouse keepers find enough rest to climb another spiral staircase, tend another lamp, and greet another winter dawn with tired eyes and steady hands. The sea continues throwing itself against the rocks outside. The bed answers with complete refusal to move. That quiet stubbornness turns out to be exactly what the night requires. You slip beneath the blankets expecting the storm to keep you awake for hours. Instead, something unexpected happens. Your ears stop trying to separate every sound. The wind no longer seems like 100 different voices shouting outside the tower. The crashing waves blend into one deep, rolling roar. Rain becomes a steady whisper against stone and glass. Even the occasional groan of heavy timber settles into a rhythm that repeats often enough to feel almost familiar. The keeper smiles when he notices your puzzled expression. He says the sea is loud only at first. Eventually, it becomes part of the room. That idea seems impossible. Then another minute passes. Then another. Little by little, your mind stops treating every crash as a warning. It begins treating the noise as background. Much like someone living beside a railway eventually sleeps through passing trains. Modern sleep researchers understand that the brain gradually adapts to repetitive sounds that pose no immediate danger. This process allows people to ignore familiar noise while remaining sensitive to sudden changes. Lighthouse keepers may not know the scientific explanation, but they certainly know the experience. The steady roar outside has another surprising quality. It rarely becomes completely silent. Silence can actually feel more unsettling. When the wind suddenly eases, the keeper lifts his head. He listens carefully. A change in sound sometimes means a change in weather, a shift in wind direction, a falling tide, or the brief calm before stronger gusts arrive. Inside the tower, every familiar noise forms part of an invisible map. The clock ticks, the stove hums softly, water bubbles in the kettle. The lantern mechanism turns somewhere above. The building itself produces tiny creaks as temperature changes affect wood and iron. Together they create a soundscape that rarely changes unless something deserves attention. One mainstream historical fact reflects this reality. Lighthouse keepers became remarkably skilled at recognizing problems through sound alone. An unfamiliar scrape, a change in the lamp mechanism, or an unusual vibration often alerted them before they saw anything wrong. You begin noticing patterns. Every larger wave produces a low thud. A second later comes a faint shiver beneath the floorboards. Then the window gives a gentle rattle. The sequence repeats again, and again, and again. Soon your breathing begins matching the rhythm without your realizing it. The storm almost resembles slow music. Not cheerful music. Certainly not dance music. More the sort of tune performed by an orchestra consisting entirely of determined oceans. The keeper pours another cup of tea before extinguishing one of the lamps. Only the necessary light remains. Less light encourages sleep while still allowing safe movement through the room. Bright lanterns are reserved for work. Soft light belongs to rest. Outside, rain strikes the glass with tiny rapid taps. The sound reminds you of countless fingers drumming politely on a tabletop. Far above, wind whistles around the lantern gallery. The note changes as each gust arrives. Some tones are low. Others become surprisingly high. The tower itself seems to play along. Certain stair rails vibrate faintly. A loose bucket somewhere below produces a dull metallic tap until someone quietly wedges it into place. Small adjustments like this matter. A preventable noise can become surprisingly irritating after weeks of listening to it every night. The keeper explains that new assistants often struggle during their first weeks. Every crash startles them. Every whistle sounds alarming. They wake repeatedly. Veteran keepers sleep much more steadily, because experience teaches which sounds belong to ordinary weather, The body becomes educated. One quirky coastal belief claims that every lighthouse has its own voice. Fishermen sometimes describe particular towers by the noises they make during storms. One sings, another growls, another whistles. Whether this comes from imagination or careful observation probably depends on whom you ask. The lighthouse cat appears once again. It circles twice before settling into a basket beside the stove. Within moments it is asleep. Apparently the animal has already completed several years of advanced education in ignoring terrible weather. Its confidence feels strangely reassuring. You wonder whether the cat ever dreams. Perhaps of chasing mice. Perhaps of fish. Perhaps of visitors who ask entirely too many questions. The fire settles lower. Coal shifts with a gentle crackle. Warmth spreads slowly through the room without becoming excessive. Sleeping in cooler air beneath heavy blankets often proves more comfortable than trying to overheat the room. The keeper opens the stove door briefly, adjusts the fuel, then closes it again. Even this produces familiar sounds. Metal clicks. Coal settles. The draft resumes its quiet pull. Nothing unexpected. Historians still argue whether psychological adaptation or physical exhaustion played the greater role in helping lighthouse keepers sleep through severe storms. Daily labour demanded considerable strength, yet many personal accounts also describe how constant exposure gradually transformed frightening noises into ordinary companions. Both explanations seem entirely believable. Your eyelids begin feeling heavier, not because the storm has weakened. If anything, it grows stronger. The difference lies inside your own mind. The sounds have lost their sharp edges. They no longer arrive as separate warnings. They arrive together as one continuous presence, like rain on a distant roof, like leaves moving through a forest, like waves breathing beneath the tower. You realize something else. The keeper never tries to fight the noise. He does not complain about it. He does not wish it away. He simply accepts that this is how winter sounds here. Acceptance requires less energy than resistance. Perhaps that is one quiet secret of life beside the sea. The tower gives another slow tremor. A wave has struck somewhere below. The vibration passes through stone into wood, then fades almost immediately. The keeper barely opens one eye. He listens. Everything sounds normal. Within seconds, he settles comfortably beneath his blanket once more. You follow his example. The roaring outside has become strangely distant, even though it remains just beyond the wall. Each gust blends into the next. Each wave replaces the previous one. The storm continues its endless conversation with the rocks. Inside, breathing grows slower. The clock continues marking the passing minutes with patient certainty. The lantern above turns faithfully across the dark horizon. The little room holds its warmth. The stone walls hold their strength. Your thoughts drift more gently now. The sea keeps speaking. Your ears simply stop treating every sentence as urgent. That quiet change allows rest to arrive, even while the winter night continues roaring beyond the window. Your eyes open before you're fully awake. No loud alarm rings through the tower. No brass bell demands immediate action. Instead, a gentle hand rests briefly on your shoulder. The keeper standing beside the bed speaks quietly. It is your watch. The words are calm, almost whispered, because there is no reason to wake everyone at once. Life inside a lighthouse depends upon people taking turns. While one keeper rests, another watches the light, checks the weather, and makes certain the station continues doing its job. This simple rhythm allows sleep to exist at all. Without shifts, a single keeper would remain awake for far too long during winter nights. You pull on thick wool socks that are pleasantly warm from hanging near the stove. Boots slide onto your feet without much effort because they were carefully placed before bedtime. Within moments, you are climbing the spiral staircase with a lantern in one hand and one hand gripping the smooth iron rail. The tower feels different at night. The rooms below are quiet. The sounds of sleeping people blend with the steady breathing of the building itself. Each footstep echoes softly against stone. The higher you climb, the louder the wind becomes. Near the lantern room, the storm announces itself with renewed enthusiasm, yet the movement inside remains steady and unhurried. For many lighthouse stations, several keepers shared responsibilities. A principal keeper supervised the station while assistant keepers carried out scheduled duties. The exact number depended on the importance and isolation of the lighthouse. Busy coastal lights often required more personnel than small harbour beacons. Every station developed routines suited to its equipment. Watch schedules varied, but someone always remained responsible for the light. The sea never promised convenient office hours. You enter the lantern room. The great lens revolves slowly, casting its brilliant beam across the dark water. Its movement feels almost alive. The machinery produces a gentle clicking sound that repeats with comforting regularity. You glance toward the clock mounted on the wall. Everything matches the schedule. The keeper who has just finished his watch gives a short report. Wind increasing. Visibility poor. Lamp burning cleanly. Nothing unusual observed. The exchange takes less than a minute. No speeches, no dramatic ceremonies, just practical information passed from one tired person to another. Then he disappears down the stairs toward a waiting bed. You understand something important. Good shift changes depend upon trust. The man going to sleep believes you will care for the light exactly as he has done. You believe the next keeper will relieve you in turn. The entire system rests upon reliability. A mainstream historical fact illustrates this responsibility. Lighthouse keepers maintain detailed watch logs throughout their shifts. These records documented weather conditions, visibility, passing vessels, maintenance performed, and any unusual events. The log served both as an official record and as a way to communicate accurately between watches. You open the station log. The pen scratches quietly across the paper. Wind from the northwest, heavy rain, strong seas, visibility poor. The handwriting remains neat despite cold fingers. Nobody rewards beautiful penmanship during a gale, but clear writing prevents confusion later. Outside, darkness stretches in every direction. Occasionally the beam catches white spray exploding against distant rocks. For an instant the water glows, then darkness returns. The lantern glass requires inspection. A thin film of soot or salt can reduce the light's effectiveness. You wipe one section carefully with a prepared cloth. Every movement is deliberate. Nothing is rushed. One careless mistake near expensive optical equipment creates far more work than patient maintenance ever would. The clockwork mechanism also deserves attention. Many historic lighthouse lenses rotate using heavy descending weights, much like enormous grandfather clocks. The weights travel slowly downward inside the tower and must be wound back to the top at regular intervals. You unlock the mechanism, then begin turning the winding handle. Round and round and round. The weight climbs patiently upward. It feels rather like convincing an extremely stubborn elephant to use the stairs. By the time you finish, your shoulders have received enough exercise to justify another helping of stew later. Quirky tidbit survives in several lighthouse traditions. Some keepers gave affectionate nicknames to particularly reliable pieces of machinery. A dependable clockwork system might receive a proper name and be spoken to almost like another member of the station. Whether the machine appreciated the attention remains unknown. It certainly never complained about overtime. The hours pass quietly. Storms are often loud but surprisingly repetitive. Your work consists mostly of observing, watching, listening, checking, recording. Small routines repeated faithfully become the invisible foundation of maritime safety. Historians still argue whether the psychological strain of night watches came more from loneliness or from constant responsibility. A keeper might spend hours without speaking to another person, while knowing that countless sailors depended upon the light remaining visible. Both burdens weigh differently upon different people. You sip warm tea from a sturdy mug. The heat spreads pleasantly through cold hands. Steam briefly fogs your spectacles before drifting away. The room smells faintly of warm metal, polished brass, oil, and salt carried upward by every gust. Far below, someone coughs once in his sleep. The sound barely reaches you. The rest of the tower remains peaceful. You glance once more across the sea. Nothing appears except endless darkness broken by the sweeping beam. It is strangely beautiful. The isolation feels enormous, yet the steady work leaves little room for loneliness. Every few minutes another task requests attention. Another note enters the log. Another glance checks the flame. Another look confirms that the lens continues turning smoothly. Routine becomes its own quiet companion. Eventually soft footsteps rise through the staircase. The next keeper appears carrying his own lantern. His hair looks pleasantly untidy. His expression suggests he has enjoyed exactly enough sleep to continue functioning without becoming cheerful. He smiles anyway. The two of you exchange the latest observations. No vessels sighted, lamp steady, mechanism wound, weather unchanged. The report finishes almost before it begins. Responsibility passes gently from one pair of hands to another. You descend the staircase. The sounds become softer with every step downward. Wind fades. Clockwork grows distant. The warmth of the living quarters welcomes you again. A kettle still rests near the stove. Someone has thoughtfully left hot water ready for whoever finishes the watch. Small kindnesses matter greatly in isolated places. You pour a cup. Drink slowly. Remove your boots. The blankets waiting on the bed still hold a little warmth. Outside, winter continues testing the tower without success. Inside, the carefully arranged system of shared duty allows another keeper to close tired eyes. Soon it allows you to do the same. Sleep arrives not because the work is finished, but because someone else now stands faithfully beneath the turning light. The sea never stops. Neither does the lighthouse. Only the people within it pause, one careful shift at a time. Your rest lasts only until another quiet knock comes at the bedroom door. Nobody apologizes for interrupting your sleep. The lighthouse follows the needs of the lamp rather than the wishes of the people caring for it. You pull on your sweater, lace your boots, and begin climbing the spiral staircase once again. The tower feels warmer than the freezing night outside, yet cooler than any ordinary home. Every step carries the familiar scent of polished brass, lamp oil, stone, and faint coal smoke rising from the stove below. At the top, the lantern room glows with steady golden light. The enormous lens catches the flame and bends it into a brilliant beam stretching across the sea. Watching it work is strangely mesmerizing. The light appears effortless from a passing ship, but standing beside it reveals the truth. Every minute of brightness depends upon careful human attention. Before electricity became common in lighthouses, most lights burned oil. Early keepers often used whale oil, followed by colza oil made from rapeseed, and later kerosene became increasingly widespread because it burned more efficiently. Regardless of the fuel, the keeper's responsibility remained the same. The flame had to stay clean, bright, and reliable. You step closer. The burner produces a gentle hiss. Heat gathers around the lantern. Outside the glass, freezing rain races sideways through the darkness. Inside, the air feels almost tropical by comparison. The keeper removes a pair of protective gloves before opening part of the lamp assembly. Every movement appears practiced. Nothing is forced. Nothing happens quickly. He trims the wick with a special pair of scissors. A poorly trimmed wick burns unevenly. An uneven flame creates smoke. Smoke darkens the glass. Dirty glass weakens the beam. A small mistake at the wick can eventually reach sailors several kilometers away. That realization makes even tiny tasks feel important. You watch him inspect the flame from several angles. The color matters. The height matters. Even the shape of the burning edge receives attention. He makes one tiny adjustment. Immediately the light becomes steadier. It is remarkable how much care goes into maintaining something that most people notice only for a few passing seconds from a distant deck. A mainstream historical fact reflects this constant effort. The invention of the Fresnel lens during the 19th century transformed lighthouse illumination. Its carefully designed rings concentrated light far more efficiently than earlier systems, allowing brighter beams that reached much greater distances while using less fuel. The great lens surrounding you sparkles with dozens of curved glass surfaces. Each prism catches the flame differently. Standing nearby almost feels like standing inside a crystal cathedral built for sailors instead of worshippers. Cleaning the lens becomes one of the night's most delicate jobs. You lift a soft cloth. Very gently, you polish away tiny traces of soot and salt. No rough fabric is allowed near the precious glass. Scratches scatter light. Cloudy surfaces reduce visibility. The keeper treats every panel with the care of someone polishing a priceless family heirloom. In many ways, that is exactly what it is. The storm continues rattling the outside gallery. Yet inside the lantern room, calm concentration replaces anxiety. The work demands enough attention that there is little room left for worrying. A small supply cabinet holds spare wicks, polishing cloths, cleaning brushes, funnels, oil containers, and carefully arranged tools. Everything has a designated place. If darkness or exhaustion arrives, familiar organization saves valuable time. You notice that several tools show years of use. Smooth wooden handles, brass edges worn shiny by countless hands. One screwdriver has clearly survived generations of repairs. The keeper smiles when he sees you examining it. He says the tool is older than either of you. Judging by its appearance, it may also be wiser. The fuel reservoir requires inspection next. Oil levels cannot simply be guessed. Running out would be unthinkable. The keeper checks the supply with steady hands, then carefully tops it up using a narrow funnel that prevents unnecessary spills. Lamp oil has a distinctive smell. Not unpleasant, not pleasant either, simply unforgettable. Before long, you suspect you could recognize it from the opposite side of the harbour. One quirky tidbit survives in lighthouse stories from several countries. Some experienced keepers claimed they could identify a lamp problem simply by the smell drifting from the burner. Whether the flame burned too rich, too weak, or produced excessive smoke supposedly revealed itself before the eye noticed anything unusual. Perhaps years of practice truly sharpen the nose, or perhaps every profession eventually convinces itself of a few delightful mysteries. Historians still argue whether the greatest challenge of operating oil lamps came from maintaining consistent brightness, or from preventing tiny maintenance errors from gradually reducing efficiency throughout long winter nights. Either way, discipline mattered enormously. You step outside onto the narrow gallery surrounding the lantern. The wind grabs your coat immediately. Cold rain stings your face. The iron railing feels icy beneath your gloves. From here, the sea appears endless. White waves burst against hidden rocks far below. Spray climbs astonishingly high before falling back into darkness. The lighthouse beam sweeps over the water with perfect rhythm. For one brilliant moment, foam shines like silver. Then the darkness closes again. You understand why lantern windows must remain spotless. Every fraction of the lost brightness matters. Ships searching for the coast deserve the strongest signal possible. Returning inside feels wonderfully pleasant. Warm air surrounds you once more. Your spectacles fog instantly. You wipe them with a cloth while the keeper chuckles quietly. Apparently everyone experiences the same problem. The lantern room grows peaceful again. Only the steady hiss of the burner accompanies the slow turning of the lens. The clockwork mechanism clicks patiently. The polished brass reflects soft golden light across the curved walls. Hours pass through repeated inspections. Flame, glass, fuel, mechanism, logbooker. Then the cycle quietly begins again. Rather than becoming tedious, the repetition creates confidence. Every successful inspection means another stretch of dependable light reaching sailors beyond the storm. The keeper writes one more neat entry into the station log. Lamp trimmed, lens cleaned, fuel replenished, burning normally. Simple words, enormous importance. You stand beside the glowing lantern while winter continues raging outside. The storm remains loud, the sea remains restless. Yet the beam never hesitates. Its calm rhythm slices through rain and darkness with unwavering purpose. Only because someone climbs these stairs, checks each detail, and sacrifices another peaceful night's sleep does that reassuring light continue guiding strangers safely across the cold sea. You leave the warm glow of the lantern room and make your way back down the spiral staircase. The wind fades with every step. The steady hiss of the lamp becomes a distant whisper. Soon another sound takes its place. The quiet crackling of the stove. It is a wonderfully ordinary sound. After hours spent beside roaring seas and rattling glass, the gentle popping of burning coal feels almost luxurious. The living quarters gather around this single source of warmth as naturally as sailors gather around a safe harbour. The stove is not especially large. It does not need to be. The rooms themselves are compact, allowing precious heat to spread more efficiently. Thick stone walls hold back much of the weather, but they also remain stubbornly cold. Without a steady fire, winter would slowly reclaim every corner. The keeper crouches beside the stove and opens its iron door. Orange light spills across the floorboards. He adds 2 carefully chosen lumps of coal rather than filling the firebox completely. Too much fuel wastes heat and burns unevenly. Too little requires constant attention. Years of experience teach exactly how much the stove wants. It seems almost as though the old iron appliance has developed its own personality. You suspect it would be rather opinionated if given the opportunity. Coal became an increasingly common heating fuel during the 19th century, especially in Britain and other industrial regions. Earlier lighthouse stations often relied upon wood or peat, where those fuels were more readily available. The choice depended largely upon geography and local supply. Regardless of the fuel, every keeper understood one simple truth. A warm room encouraged better rest. Better rest produced sharper judgment. Sharper judgment kept the light shining. A heavy kettle rests on the stove, sending gentle ribbons of steam toward the ceiling. Water is always heating. Tea appears with remarkable frequency inside lighthouse logbooks and personal diaries. Coffee makes regular appearances as well. Both drinks provide warmth as much as refreshment. The keeper pours steaming tea into thick ceramic mugs. The mugs are sturdy rather than elegant. Fine porcelain would have little chance of surviving years of accidental knocks and vibrating shelves. You wrap cold hands around the mug. The warmth spreads slowly through stiff fingers. Even before taking the first sip, you begin feeling more comfortable. The tea itself is strong enough to convince sleep to wait politely outside for a little while longer. A loaf of dark bread sits beside the stove. Nearby rests a pot containing thick vegetable soup prepared earlier in the day. Simple meals suit lighthouse life well. Stews, soups, oatmeal, salted meat, dried peas, potatoes, and fresh fish, when weather allows, all appear regularly on the menu. Fancy cooking becomes difficult when supply boats visit according to the sea instead of according to recipes. One keeper jokes that every meal eventually becomes either stew or ingredients patiently waiting to become stew. Nobody argues. The evidence is sitting right there in the pot. The dining table serves many purposes: meals, letter writing, repairs, logbook entries, games of cards during calmer evenings. Everything happens around this one dependable piece of furniture. Several chairs stand nearby, each one smoothed by decades of use. One creaks dramatically whenever someone sits down. Curiously, nobody bothers repairing it. Perhaps the chair enjoys announcing every visitor. Heavy curtains hang across the doorway leading toward the sleeping rooms. Their purpose extends beyond privacy. The fabric helps keep warm air where people need it most. Closing a curtain can make a noticeable difference during bitter weather by slowing drafts that creep through stairwells and doorways. Every small improvement matters. Clothing plays an equally important role. The keeper wears layers instead of relying upon one heavy garment. A linen shirt rests beneath a wool sweater. Another thicker wool coat waits nearby. Scarves, knitted caps, and sturdy socks remain within easy reach. If extra warmth is required, another layer goes on. Removing a layer proves easier than wishing one existed. A mainstream historical fact illustrates this practical approach. Wool was widely valued by lighthouse keepers because it continued insulating, even after becoming damp. Cotton absorbed moisture readily and dried more slowly in cold maritime conditions. Wool, therefore, became one of the most trusted materials for people working beside the sea. You notice drying racks suspended near the stove. Gloves, socks, oilskins, scarves. Everything hangs carefully rather than being thrown into a pile. Air must circulate freely, otherwise damp clothing may remain wet for days. The room smells pleasantly of warm wool, coal smoke, and fresh bread. It is not the scent of luxury, it is the scent of survival made comfortable. One quirky detail appears in several lighthouse households. Some keepers kept small potted plants near sunny windows whenever conditions allowed. A touch of green brought surprising cheer into rooms surrounded by endless grey water. Keeping such plants alive required patience. Salt air, limited sunlight, and cold winters offered very little encouragement. The determined little plants became symbols of ordinary life continuing in extraordinary places. Historians still argue whether shared meals contributed more to morale than any other daily routine inside isolated lighthouse stations. Personal letters often describe conversations around the table with remarkable affection. The food itself receives compliments less frequently. Apparently boiled cabbage inspired loyalty to duty more than loyalty to flavour. Evening settles gently inside the room. Someone mends a torn sleeve. Another keeper sharpens a knife using slow, careful strokes. A third quietly reads a chapter from a well-worn book. Conversation rises and falls naturally. Nobody feels obligated to speak constantly. Silence among companions feels entirely different from loneliness. It is comfortable. The lighthouse cat strolls through the room with impressive confidence. It pauses beside every chair, clearly conducting an important inspection. Eventually it accepts a warm place near the stove. Its responsibilities appear complete. The cat curls into a perfect circle and promptly falls asleep. You begin suspecting it works fewer shifts than everyone else. Outside, another blast of wind shakes the tower. The windows tremble. The stove continues burning steadily. Nobody even looks up. The building has taught its occupants which sounds deserve attention and which belong to ordinary winter evenings. Warmth changes more than body temperature. Cold encourages tension. Warmth allows shoulders to relax. Hands become steadier. Conversation grows easier. Sleep arrives more willingly. You lean back in the sturdy wooden chair while the fire glows softly behind its iron door. Steam rises lazily from your half-finished mug of tea. The room feels secure despite the weather raging beyond thick stone walls. No expensive furniture fills the space. No extravagant decorations compete for attention. Instead, comfort comes from glowing coals, shared routines, familiar faces, dry clothing, and the reassuring knowledge that everyone contributes to the same quiet purpose. Within this modest room, winter loses much of its authority. The storm remains outside. The warmth remains within. For a few peaceful hours, that simple balance is enough to let tired lighthouse keepers close their eyes and truly rest. You wake before sunrise to a sound you cannot immediately identify. It is not louder than the storm. In fact, it's quieter. The wind still growls around the lantern. Waves continue striking the rocks below with dependable determination. Rain rattles against the windows in uneven bursts. Yet something feels different. The keeper has already noticed. He pauses halfway through pouring tea and tilts his head slightly, listening to the tower instead of looking out the window. You hear that he asks. You admit that you do not. He smiles. You will. The lesson begins without leaving the room. The lighthouse itself has become an instrument. Every beam, stair, window, and wall communicates tiny pieces of information. Most visitors hear only noise. Experienced keepers hear patterns. Another wave arrives. The familiar deep thud travels upward through the stone. A second later comes the gentle vibration beneath your boots. Then the window gives its usual faint rattle. Everything follows the expected order. The keeper nods. Normal. Another gust sweeps across the gallery. This time the whistle around the lantern changes slightly. Not louder, not softer, just different. The wind has shifted direction. You would never have noticed. He notices immediately. Years spent inside one tower have trained his ears almost as carefully as his eyes. Many lighthouse keepers became remarkably skilled at reading approaching weather long before modern forecasting reached remote stations. They combined instruments with constant observation, building an understanding that grew stronger through repetition rather than formal scientific education alone. The keeper walks toward the barometer mounted neatly on the wall. Its polished brass catches the firelight. The needle has moved only a little since midnight. A falling barometer generally suggests decreasing atmospheric pressure, often associated with approaching storms or worsening weather. Keepers checked these instruments regularly because knowing what might arrive several hours later could influence every decision made around the stations. He writes the reading into the logbook. The numbers themselves matter. Their change matters even more. One measurement tells little. Many measurements tell a story. You glance toward the narrow window. Clouds race across the sky so quickly that patches of pale morning light appear and disappear within seconds. The horizon itself seems restless. The keeper studies the sea. Different colours reveal different conditions. Dark patches may indicate stronger gusts touching the water. White streaks suggest fresh wind building farther offshore. Breaking waves expose hidden reefs. Foam drifting in unusual directions may reveal changing currents. To you it looks like an energetic collection of wet confusion. To him it resembles a familiar language. He points towards distant gulls circling lower than before. Many seabirds react to weather changes by altering their flight patterns. While birds alone cannot predict every storm, Experienced coastal people often paid close attention to unusual behavior among local wildlife. A flock suddenly turns inland. The keeper watches quietly. They know something. Perhaps they do. Perhaps they simply dislike flying into freezing rain. Either explanation seems perfectly reasonable. One quirky tradition survives in several maritime communities. Some old keepers claimed that the smell of the air changed before severe weather arrived. They spoke of sharper salt, stronger seaweed, or an almost metallic scent carried on certain winds. Modern science recognizes that humidity, airborne particles, and changing weather can indeed affect how smells travel. Although personal experience probably played an equally important role, the keeper opens the outer gallery door for only a few seconds. Cold air rushes inside. Your face instantly regrets standing so close. He closes the door again. Colder, he says. Nothing more. Even temperature becomes another clue. A rapid drop may accompany changing weather systems, especially during winter. No single observation provides certainty. Together they create a growing picture. Historians still argue whether the finest lighthouse keepers relied primarily upon careful instruments or upon instincts developed through decades beside the sea. Personal journals suggest that many trusted both, allowing measured readings to confirm what their senses already suspected. The tower offers still more information. Wooden stairs sometimes creak differently as humidity changes. Doors fit more tightly during damp weather. Iron hardware expands and contracts with shifting temperatures. Condensation appears sooner on cold glass. Even the stove behaves differently depending upon air pressure. The draft rising through the chimney strengthens or weakens with changing conditions. The keeper adjusts one vent only slightly. Almost immediately the fire settles into a steadier burn. Such tiny adjustments become second nature after years of practice. You realize that almost nothing inside the lighthouse goes unnoticed. A dripping pipe, a loose hinge, a different echo on the staircase. Every detail may point towards something requiring attention. This constant awareness does not create nervousness. It creates preparedness. The tower rewards people who observe patiently. On a nearby shelf rests a weather journal separate from the official station log. Its pages contain handwritten notes collected over many winters. Strong northeast wind after red sunrise. Heavy frost followed clear evening. Sea unusually calm before gale. Some observations prove accurate repeatedly. Others remain interesting guesses. Keeping such notes helps future keepers compare experience across many seasons. You flip carefully through the pages. The handwriting changes over the years as different men contribute their own observations. Together they create an unofficial conversation stretching across generations. One entry simply reads, "The chimney whistles before snow." No explanation follows. No argument. Just quiet confidence. You wonder how many winters inspired that single sentence. The lighthouse cat suddenly lifts its head from beside the stove. Its ears twitch toward the staircase. Moments later, footsteps descend from above. Another keeper appears, carrying fresh observations from the lantern room. Visibility improving slightly. Wind veering north. Light burning steadily. The exchange lasts less than a minute. Each report adds another small piece to the morning's understanding. Outside, the storm begins changing character. Not ending, simply changing. The rain grows finer. The wind becomes steadier instead of gusting wildly. The sea still throws white foam across the rocks, but its rhythm feels more organized. The keeper notices before you do. He nods once toward the window. You hear it now. You stop and listen. He is right. The tower sounds different. The vibrations arrive with slightly longer pauses. The whistle around the gallery has lowered in pitch. The building itself seems to breathe differently. Nothing dramatic has happened. Only countless tiny details have shifted together. You finally understand that reading winter weather is not about discovering one magical sign. It is about noticing hundreds of ordinary ones. The lighthouse speaks continuously through stone, glass, iron, wind, and water. Experienced keepers simply learn its language. The afternoon fades into another long winter evening. Grey clouds press lower over the sea until sky and water almost become the same colour. The horizon disappears behind blowing spray. Even from the lantern gallery, the world seems to shrink to a circle of wind, rain, and the dependable sweep of light. The keeper glances toward the windows. It will be a noisy night. He says it with the calm tone of someone predicting that bread will need slicing. You have learned enough to recognize that calm voices often accompany the worst weather. The first powerful gust arrives just after darkness settles. The lantern room hums softly, then the sound grows. Wind races around the curved stone tower, searching for every tiny opening. It whistles through iron railings, sighs across the glass, and finally settles into a deep, roaring note that seems to come from everywhere at once. The windows begin to tremble. Not violently, not yet, just enough for the glass to buzz gently inside its sturdy frames. You instinctively look toward them. The keeper does not. Instead, he checks the lamp. Inside the lighthouse, priorities remain wonderfully consistent. A wave crashes below. Several seconds later, another follows. Then another. The sea has found a rhythm of its own. Unlike the steady beat from calmer weather, these impacts arrive with surprising force. Each one sends a faint shudder through the stone beneath your boots. Nothing loose remains on tables. Nothing hangs carelessly from hooks. Every chair sits firmly against the floor. The room has been prepared long before the storm reached the coast. That preparation matters now. One mainstream historical fact explains why. Many lighthouse stations routinely secured shutters or installed additional storm panes over vulnerable windows before severe weather. These protective layers helped shield valuable glass from flying debris, hail, and the tremendous force of wind-driven spray. You help fasten an interior wooden shutter across one of the smaller windows. The heavy panel swings into place on thick iron hinges. Strong bars slide across with satisfying certainty. Once closed, the outside world becomes only sound. The room grows noticeably darker. The keeper lights another lamp. Its warm glow reflects gently from polished brass and white-painted walls. The darkness beyond the shutter somehow makes the room feel even safer. Another tremendous gust arrives. This time the tower gives a slow, almost thoughtful movement. You grip the table automatically. The keeper raises one eyebrow. It always does that. You release the table with mild embarrassment. Apparently the furniture was not planning an escape after all. Heavy weather affects every sense. You hear it constantly. You feel tiny vibrations beneath your feet. Occasionally you smell fresh salt carried through the smallest cracks whenever someone briefly opens an outer door. Even the air inside seems to pulse gently as pressure changes outside. The storm has entered every part of the building without actually coming inside. The stove continues burning steadily. Its familiar crackling provides an oddly comforting contrast to the roaring beyond the walls. Someone quietly places another kettle on top. There is a simple rule inside the lighthouse. If uncertain, make tea. It may not solve every problem. It certainly improves the atmosphere. The kettle seems fully committed to public service. Rain changes into sleet for a short while. Tiny frozen pellets strike the glass with rapid tapping sounds. The noise resembles handfuls of dried peas thrown against a window. Then the temperature shifts slightly. Rain returns. The sound changes once more. Experienced keepers notice these differences immediately. Each pattern tells something about conditions outside. The station log receives another careful entry. Wind increasing. Heavy seas. Driving rain. Visibility very poor. Simple words continue describing remarkably complicated weather. One quirky tradition from some coastal stations involved assigning colourful nicknames to especially memorable storms. Instead of referring only to dates, keepers might privately remember the singing gale, the crooked chimney storm, or the night the barrels escaped. Official records remained serious. Private conversations allowed slightly more imagination. Historians still argue whether these unofficial names helped preserve memories accurately or encouraged dramatic storytelling during long winter evenings. Perhaps both happened at the same time. The lighthouse cat has completely abandoned dignity. It has discovered that the warmest place in the room lies directly beside the stove. There it stretches comfortably while the storm performs with great enthusiasm outside. The animal occasionally opens one eye, decides the weather remains thoroughly unpleasant, and immediately resumes sleeping. Its confidence borders on inspirational. You wish your own nerves possessed similar qualifications. The keeper walks once more through every occupied room. He checks door bolts. He confirms that hanging lanterns remain secure. He ensures the stove draft remains steady. He glances at the ceiling for any unexpected leaks. Nothing receives dramatic attention. Every inspection follows the same quiet rhythm. Routine leaves very little space for panic. Another enormous wave strikes the rocks. This one sounds different. Not louder, closer. Spray rises high enough to splash against part of the tower. Water rattles across stone before draining away into darkness. You imagine standing outside during such a moment. The thought ends almost immediately. You are perfectly content remaining indoors. Somewhere above, the great lens continues turning. Its beam cuts faithfully through rain, thick enough to hide nearly everything else. Ships far offshore may never know how violent conditions have become around the lighthouse itself. They see only the reassuring flash appearing exactly when expected. That reliability is the entire purpose. The keeper pauses briefly beside the clock. He compares the time with his pocket watch. Both agree. Another small detail quietly confirmed. You realise that confidence inside the lighthouse comes from hundreds of tiny successful checks. Each bolt fastened. Each window secured. Each flame inspected. Each log completed. Together they create calm. Outside, the storm continues searching for weakness. Inside, it finds preparation instead. Hours pass almost unnoticed. The roaring never truly stops, yet your ears gradually accept it. The shaking becomes familiar rather than frightening. The windows continue humming softly behind their shutters. The stove radiates dependable warmth. The lantern sends its unwavering message across the dark sea. You settle into a sturdy chair with a blanket across your knees. Another mug of hot tea warms your hands. The storm may command the ocean. It may command the sky. It may even command the sound surrounding the tower. But within these thick stone walls, careful habits, patient work, and quiet confidence continue holding their ground. The lighthouse remains exactly where it has promised to be. So do the people inside it. Morning arrives so quietly that you almost miss it. The storm has not disappeared. The wind still circles the tower with stubborn determination. Waves continue throwing white spray against the rocks below. Yet a pale grey light slowly fills the narrow windows, replacing the darkness that has surrounded the lighthouse for so many hours. The keeper opens the shutter. A cold breath of daylight enters the room. Beyond the glass stretches nothing but sea. No neighbouring houses, no fishing village, no distant church bell, only water reaching toward every horizon. You suddenly understand that isolation is not simply the absence of company. It is the absence of ordinary life. There are no crowds, no busy streets, no markets, no unexpected visitors dropping by for conversation. The lighthouse exists almost as its own tiny world. Its people eat together, work together, and sleep beneath the same roof while the ocean decides when anyone else may arrive. For some keepers, this quiet becomes deeply satisfying. For others, it slowly grows heavy. Many historical lighthouse journals reveal remarkably different reactions to solitude. Some keepers describe peaceful days filled with reading, careful maintenance, and the steady comfort of routine. Others write about loneliness that seems to stretch as endlessly as the sea itself. You can easily imagine both experiences. The silence between storms feels almost louder than the storms themselves. The keeper reaches toward a shelf and removes a small wooden box. Inside rests a collection of letters tied neatly with string. Some pages have softened at the folds after being read dozens of times. Ink has faded slightly. Edges have become worn, yet every letter remains precious. Mail arrives only when weather allows. Sometimes that means several weeks, occasionally even longer. Each envelope carries familiar handwriting across dangerous water. Family news, village gossip, children learning new words, neighbours repairing fences, someone's new puppy causing trouble. Nothing extraordinary. Exactly the sort of ordinary life that feels extraordinary from a lonely rock surrounded by winter seas. You notice that one letter has been folded so often it almost opens by itself. The keeper smiles quietly. "My daughter wrote this." He reads only a few lines before carefully placing it back inside. Some memories need no audience. Books become trusted companions as well. A small shelf contains history, navigation manuals, poetry, religious writings, and a few adventure stories whose pages have clearly travelled through many winters. Reading serves several purposes. It passes time. It sharpens the mind. It offers temporary escape without leaving the tower. You choose a weathered volume from the shelf. The first page bears 3 different signatures. Each belongs to a keeper from years gone by. Their handwriting forms an invisible chain connecting generations of people who watched the same sea from the same windows. One mainstream historical fact reflects this quiet tradition. Many lighthouse keepers kept personal diaries in addition to official station logs. These private journals recorded thoughts, family memories, daily routines, and emotions that rarely appeared in formal government records. Official logs state that rain fell. Private diaries reveal how it felt to listen to that rain for 12 uninterrupted hours. The difference is surprisingly important. You sit beside the stove while another keeper carefully repairs a worn boot. His needle passes steadily through thick leather. The work requires patience more than speed. Replacing boots may not be possible until the next supply vessel arrives. Repairing them becomes another ordinary skill learned through necessity. Conversation drifts gently around the room. No one feels pressured to speak constantly. Long silences become comfortable among people who know one another well. A few sentences, then quiet. Another remark, then everyone returns to their work. It resembles the rhythm of waves, speaking, pausing, speaking again. The lighthouse cat wanders across the room, carrying an expression suggesting profound philosophical importance. It sits beside the window and stares thoughtfully at several determined seagulls. The birds ignore it completely. The cat appears mildly offended by this lack of professional respect. One quirky belief survives in several coastal communities. Some sailors considered lighthouse cats lucky companions, believing they sensed approaching weather before humans noticed any change. Whether this came from genuine observation or simple affection remains uncertain. The cats themselves rarely commented. Historians still argue whether the greatest psychological challenge for lighthouse keepers came from physical separation or from repetitive routine that made one day resemble another. Routine certainly dominates life here. Wake, check the lamp, record observations, maintain equipment, prepare meals, read, repair, sleep, repeat. Yet inside those repeated tasks lie countless small differences. Every storm behaves differently. Every sunrise paints new colours across the sea. Every passing ship carries unknown stories. Perhaps routine and variety quietly share the same room. You wander toward the narrow window again. The tide has begun changing. Dark rocks that vanished beneath waves during the night now emerge slowly from the water. Seabirds return to inspect them. One bold gull lands triumphantly upon a slippery rock, only to discover that another wave has entirely different plans. The bird departs with remarkable speed. You cannot help smiling. The ocean occasionally enjoys practical jokes. The keeper notices your amusement. He says the gull performs that same mistake almost every week. Apparently, experience belongs to humans more consistently than to seagulls. Afternoons often bring practical work beyond caring for the light. Wooden railings require fresh paint. Metal fittings need cleaning before rust gains too much confidence. Windows must be washed. Floors swept, tools organised. Even on days without emergencies, the lighthouse never runs out of tasks. Busy hands often make lonely thoughts less persuasive. A game of chess appears after the midday meal. The board has clearly seen years of use. Several pieces bear tiny repairs where cracks have been carefully glued. The players think quietly before each move. No clocks hurry them. Outside, the sea keeps its own time. Inside, patience governs nearly everything. The room grows warmer as the stove settles into a steady burn. Someone hums an old sea song without realizing it. Another keeper quietly joins the melody. The tune drifts through the tower before fading naturally into silence. No applause follows. None is needed. Music simply fills a few peaceful minutes. You begin understanding why companionship matters so deeply in isolated places. Nobody here entertains crowds. Nobody delivers grand speeches. Instead, friendship appears through practical kindness. A fresh cup of tea placed beside tired hands. A repaired glove returned without being requested. A chair pulled closer to the fire. A shared laugh when the cat unsuccessfully attempts to supervise absolutely everyone. These small gestures become surprisingly valuable. The sea still surrounds the lighthouse from every direction. The nearest town remains far beyond the horizon. Yet inside these curved stone walls, simple routines, shared work, and quiet companionship create something stronger than isolation. They create a home. Night settles over the lighthouse once again, but this evening carries a different feeling. The storm has eased into long, sweeping winds that hum around the tower instead of shouting at it. Rain falls steadily, almost politely, tapping against the windows with a rhythm that invites quiet thoughts rather than urgent action. You discover that bedtime inside the lighthouse is never simply about lying down. Everyone has small habits. Some make perfect sense. Others seem wonderfully mysterious. The principal keeper begins by winding his pocket watch before placing it on the bedside shelf. Every evening he performs the same careful sequence. Wind the watch, fold the spectacles, lay the notebook beside the candle, check the boots. Only then does he consider sleep. The assistant keeper follows a different routine. He spends 10 minutes reading from a favourite book before blowing out the lamp. He claims that reading clears the mind after hours spent watching the sea. Judging from the well-worn pages, the method has enjoyed considerable success. You decide to try a chapter yourself. The words become slower as your eyelids grow heavier. Eventually you realise you have read the same paragraph 3 times. The book wins. Many lighthouse keepers developed personal rituals that mark the end of each day's work. These familiar routines help separate long hours of responsibility from precious hours of rest, especially when the weather outside never truly became quiet. The kettle simmers gently on the stove. Warm herbal drinks appear alongside ordinary tea. Mint grows surprisingly well in sheltered kitchen gardens at some mainland stations, while dried chamomile or other local herbs are stored for winter evenings. The warm cup in your hands carries no magical power. It simply encourages you to slow down. Sometimes that's enough. One keeper quietly polishes a small brass compass before putting it away. Another writes a few sentences in his private diary. Nothing dramatic fills the page. The rain eased after sunset. The lamp burned well. Shared bread with the others. Simple observations become treasured memories years later. You realise that ordinary days are often the ones people miss most. A mainstream historical fact illustrates this peaceful side of lighthouse life. Personal journals left by many keepers contain surprisingly little excitement. Instead of constant danger, they describe maintenance, weather, meals, reading, conversation, and careful routines repeated across months and years. Those ordinary records provide historians with valuable glimpses into daily life that official reports often overlook. The lighthouse cat appears, carrying what seems to be enormous confidence and absolutely nothing else. It leaps onto an empty chair, circles exactly 7 times, then changes its mind completely. It jumps down, crosses the room, finds another chair, repeats the entire ceremony. No one questions this complicated decision-making process. Perhaps choosing the perfect sleeping place requires advanced mathematics known only to cats. A small wooden box sits beside one bed. Inside are smooth stones collected from distant beaches during supply trips. Each stone reminds its owner of a different journey. One comes from a northern island, another from a sheltered harbour, another from a beach where wildflowers bloom during summer. Tiny keepsakes help the outside world remain close even through the longest winters. One quirky tradition survives in stories from several coastal regions. Some keepers quietly sang low-sea ballads before bed, not as performances, but almost as lullabies for themselves. This slow rhythm matched the motion of waves and made the familiar sounds of the sea seem even gentler. Whether the song soothed the singers or simply entertained the lighthouse walls remains impossible to know. The walls certainly kept every secret. Outside, the wind changes direction once more. You pause. Without thinking, you identify the new tone circling the gallery. The realization surprises you. Only a short time ago, every gust sounded identical. Now each carries its own character. One whistles, another sighs. A stronger one hums briefly through the iron railing before fading into the darkness. The tower has quietly taught your ears. Historians still argue whether these gradual adaptations happened mostly because the human brain naturally adjusted to repeated sounds, or because lighthouse keepers consciously trained themselves through years of careful listening. Either explanation feels believable, perhaps the answer includes a little of both. The bedroom grows cooler as the stove settles into its overnight burn. Fresh blankets come out. Wool socks remain firmly in place. One keeper wears a knitted nightcap. You smile politely. A few minutes later, you discover your own ears have become remarkably cold. The nightcap suddenly appears much more fashionable. The candle burns with a steady little flame. Its light creates soft shadows across the curved stone walls. The room feels smaller now. Not cramped, simply sheltered. Almost like the inside of a shell protecting everyone from the restless sea beyond. The keeper reaches beneath his pillow and removes a tiny carved wooden bird. It was made by his son years earlier. The carving is simple. The wings are uneven. One eye sits slightly higher than the other. It is completely perfect. He places it on the bedside table before lying down. Objects carrying love require no artistic perfection. They simply need memories. You settle beneath the blankets. The mattress welcomes you with its familiar creak. The pillow feels comfortably firm. Outside, waves continue breaking against the rocks with patient determination. Inside, breathing gradually becomes slower. Someone quietly turns another page in a book. Someone else whispers good night. The cat has finally selected a chair worthy of sleep and appears deeply satisfied with its investigation. The clock continues its gentle ticking. No sound dominates the room. Everything blends together. The fire, the wind, the sea, the breathing of tired keepers, the faint turning of pages. None competes for attention. Instead, they create a calm chorus that belongs only to this lonely tower. You close your eyes. The noises that once seemed overwhelming have become reassuring companions. Each familiar creak tells you the building remains strong. Each gust reminds you that thick stone still stands between warmth and winter. Each distant wave confirms that the lighthouse continues watching over the sea exactly as it should. Sleep arrives quietly, not because the night has become silent, because the sounds have become home. You wake to an unusual silence. Not complete silence. The sea never grants that gift. Instead, the wind has eased enough for individual sounds to separate once again. A gull cries somewhere beyond the lantern gallery. Water drips steadily from the iron railing. The waves still rise and fall against the rocks, but they no longer strike with the furious rhythm of the past several days. The keeper opens the outer door for a careful look. Fresh air rushes inside, carrying the clean scent of salt and wet stone. The worst has passed, he says. That does not mean the sea has become friendly. It simply means it has stopped shouting quite so loudly. As daylight spreads across the horizon, the true work begins. Storms leave behind long lists of small problems. The landing platform must be inspected. The railings checked. Drainage channels cleared of seaweed and broken shells. Every corner of the lighthouse receives attention because winter weather has a remarkable talent for finding weak spots. You step outside onto the narrow gallery. The world below looks transformed. Foam clings to every rock. Pools of seawater shimmer in shallow hollows. Pieces of driftwood lie scattered where waves have thrown them far above the normal tide line. The sea has clearly been busy during the night. One historical fact reminds you just how demanding this work could become. Many lighthouse keepers spent nearly as much time maintaining their stations after storms as they did tending the light itself. Salt water encouraged rust, loosened paint, damaged wood, and slowly wore away even the strongest masonry. Constant maintenance kept small problems from becoming dangerous ones. The keeper runs his hand along the iron railing. He stops at one bolt. It has worked itself slightly loose. Only a fraction. Most visitors would never notice. He immediately reaches for a wrench. Tiny repairs performed today prevent larger repairs tomorrow. The lesson applies surprisingly well beyond lighthouses. You descend carefully toward the landing platform. Every step requires attention because algae have turned the stone slippery. The waves have retreated enough to reveal the lower rocks. Among them lie tangled ropes, broken branches, and seaweed wrapped around iron rings fixed into the stone decades earlier. The keeper points toward one heavy iron ladder. It survived. The words carry genuine satisfaction. Replacement would be expensive. Transport would be difficult. Keeping existing equipment in good condition is always preferable. A small boat appears on the distant horizon. You instinctively wonder whether it is bringing visitors. The keeper studies it through a telescope. Then he shakes his head. Fishing vessel, passing safely because the lighthouse remained visible through the storm. No celebration follows. The success feels wonderfully ordinary. Ships passing without incident are exactly what every keeper hopes for. The lighthouse earns its greatest compliments by preventing stories rather than creating them. One quirky tradition appears in several coastal communities after especially fierce storms. Keepers sometimes search the shoreline for unusual objects carried ashore by the sea. Exotic seeds, carved driftwood, glass fishing floats, occasionally even messages sealed inside bottles. Most bottles contained nothing particularly exciting. Human imagination often supplied far better adventures than reality. Still, every discovery added a little variety to life on isolated stations. You spot an unusually smooth piece of pale wood resting among the rocks. Its twisted shape resembles a sleeping bird. The keeper picks it up. It will make a good shelf hook. Nothing goes to waste if it can serve another purpose. Historians still argue whether famous lighthouse stories have gradually emphasized dramatic rescues while overlooking the quiet success of thousands of uneventful nights. Spectacular storms certainly attract attention, yet the true achievement lies in ordinary reliability. Night after night, year after year, the lamp burns, the lens turns, ships pass safely. The routine rarely appears in newspapers because nothing disastrous happens. That quiet success deserves admiration. Back inside, damp coats are hung near the stove. Boots leave muddy footprints across the entrance floor. Brooms appear almost immediately. Cleaning begins before anyone has fully finished their tea. The lighthouse returns itself to order one task at a time. A hammer taps gently somewhere below. Fresh paint covers a scratched section of railing. Window glass receives another careful washing to remove the salt left by crashing spray. Even the brass fittings regain their familiar shine beneath patient hands. The cat supervises every repair with complete confidence. It contributes no visible labour whatsoever. Nevertheless, as it inspects each room thoroughly, perhaps moral support counts for something. At midday, the clouds finally begin breaking apart. Thin beams of sunlight slip through the gaps and touch the sea in bright silver patches. The change feels almost magical after so many grey hours. The tower itself seems brighter. The rooms no longer require lamps. Natural light fills every corner. The keeper pauses beside the window. He does not say much. He simply enjoys the sunshine. You realise that people living in exposed places learn to appreciate small gifts with unusual intensity. A calm sea, a dry coat, fresh bread, warm tea, sunlight after storm. None remains ordinary for very long. The official station log receives another neat entry. Storm damage minor. Repairs underway. Visibility improving. Those few words summarize days of careful effort. They cannot fully capture the sounds, smells, fatigue, or quiet determination that filled every hour. Yet they preserve the essential facts. The practical record continues exactly as it should. You stand once more beside the lantern room windows. The great lens shines brilliantly in the afternoon light. Soon it will begin another night's work. The mechanism has been checked, the glass polished, the fuel prepared. Everything waits in readiness. The sea outside has settled into long rolling swells. The lighthouse stands exactly where it stood before the storm arrived. Its walls remain strong, its light remains dependable, its keepers return calmly to familiar routines without seeking applause. The greatest victories inside a lighthouse often pass unnoticed. A loose bolt tightened, a clean window, a steady flame, a ship guided safely beyond hidden rocks. These quiet achievements rarely become legends, yet together they protect countless lives across generations. You leave the gallery with one final glance toward the bright horizon. The ocean stretches endlessly into the distance, calm for the moment, though every keeper knows another winter storm will someday appear beyond that line where sea meets sky. When it does, the lighthouse will be ready once again. The years begin to move more quickly than the tides. You notice it first in small details. A new fuel container arrives that lasts longer than the old ones. A fresh set of tools replaces equipment worn smooth by countless careful hands. Visitors from the mainland speak about inventions that sound almost unbelievable. The keeper listens politely while repairing a lantern bracket. Experience has taught him that every remarkable invention eventually reaches the lighthouse, usually a little later than everyone expects. The sea has always been an excellent editor of ambitious plans. If a machine cannot survive salt, wind, dampness, and endless vibration, The ocean quietly rejects it. Life inside the tower continues much as it always has. The lamp is cleaned. The log is written. Meals are shared. Storms arrive without asking permission. Yet change has already begun. One evening, a delivery boat brings unfamiliar equipment packed inside sturdy wooden crates. Everyone gathers around while the lids are lifted. Inside lie carefully machined gears, polished metal parts, and detailed instruction sheets. The assistant keeper studies them with curiosity. The principal keeper studies them with caution. Both reactions seem perfectly reasonable. One important historical development gradually transforms lighthouse work. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many stations adopted improved lamp systems, stronger fuels, more dependable clockwork mechanisms, and eventually electric lighting. Each improvement reduced the amount of constant manual attention required to keep the light burning brightly. None of these changes happen overnight. Old habits remain valuable. The new equipment must still be inspected, cleaned, and maintained. Machines may reduce work. They do not eliminate responsibility. The keeper installs one of the upgraded mechanisms over several patient afternoons. Every bolt is tightened carefully. Every moving part receives the correct amount of oil. The instructions are followed closely, although he quietly mutters that the engineer who wrote them probably never carried heavy machinery up a spiral staircase during freezing rain. You suspect he may have a point. The new mechanism performs beautifully. It also weighs an astonishing amount. Apparently, progress occasionally travels inside very heavy crates. The great lens continues turning with its familiar grace. Its motion feels unchanged, even though the machinery driving it has become more reliable. From the sea, sailors notice only the steady beam. That is exactly the goal. The finest improvements remain almost invisible to those depending upon them. The station log slowly changes as well. Earlier pages contain frequent notes about trimming wicks, replenishing oil, and polishing soot from glass. Newer entries mention electrical inspections, generator maintenance, wiring checks, and batteries. Different technology creates different routines. The careful handwriting remains exactly the same. One quirky story circulates among lighthouse workers in several coastal regions. Some veteran keepers jokingly claimed that new automatic devices possessed a mischievous personality. They behaved perfectly whenever engineers visited. Then they chose inconvenient moments to develop mysterious faults after everyone left. Whether this reflected coincidence or the timeless habit of teasing new technology remains impossible to know. The machines, rather unfairly, never received an opportunity to defend themselves. You step into a small room that now houses electrical equipment. The steady hum sounds very different from the soft hiss of an oil flame. Instead of warm brass burners and trimmed wicks, you find switches, insulated cables, and carefully labelled panels. The room smells faintly of warm metal instead of lamp oil. It feels like another chapter quietly opening. Historians still argue whether automation fundamentally changed the identity of lighthouse keepers, or simply shifted their responsibilities from tending flames to maintaining increasingly complex equipment. Many keepers adapted readily. Others missed the direct connection they had once felt with the lamp itself. Both viewpoints deserve respect. The sea outside remains wonderfully uninterested in technological debates. It continues sending waves toward the rocks with exactly the same enthusiasm. Winter winds still whistle around the gallery. Salt still settles upon every exposed surface. Rust still waits patiently for neglected metal. Nature refuses to retire simply because engineers become more inventive. A supply vessel arrives carrying a young technician. He explains the newest improvements with great excitement. The principal keeper listens carefully. When the explanation ends, he asks one quiet question. What happens when it stops working during a gale? The technician pauses, then he smiles. Together they begin discussing backup systems. The conversation becomes far more interesting after that. Redundancy becomes one of the most important ideas in lighthouse engineering. Reliable systems often include reliable alternatives. If one component fails, another continues operating. Emergency lamps remain available. Manual controls stay within reach. Human judgment continues holding an important place beside mechanical efficiency. You help test one emergency system. The procedure follows a written checklist. Power changes smoothly. The light continues shining without interruption. Everyone nods with quiet satisfaction. Success inside a lighthouse is often measured by what never happens. No darkness, no confusion, no delay. A small museum display begins forming in one unused room. Retired equipment is cleaned rather than discarded. Old burners, brass wick trimmers, glass chimneys, clockwork gears. Each object once represented the newest technology of its own generation. Now they rest quietly together, telling the story of patient improvement. The keeper gently lifts an old oil lamp from the shelf. Its polished brass still reflects the afternoon sunlight. He smiles with genuine affection. This one served well. Nothing more needs to be said. The object has earned its respect. You look through the lantern windows toward the sea. Cargo ships now appear larger than many vessels from earlier generations. Their navigation has improved. Charts have become more accurate. Communication travels faster than ever before. Yet every captain still searches instinctively for the reassuring flash of a dependable lighthouse. The purpose remains unchanged. Guide people safely, warn them of danger, stand firm when weather grows difficult. Evening approaches. The modern equipment waits quietly for another night of service. The old tools rest neatly on their shelves. The tower itself appears almost timeless. Stone does not concern itself with fashion. It simply continues standing against wind and sea exactly as it always has. You realize that technology has altered many details of lighthouse life. It has shortened certain tasks. It has reduced some exhausting labor. It has improved reliability in countless ways. Yet one truth survives every invention. Someone must still care, whether tending a flame, inspecting an electric lamp, testing a generator, or checking an automated beacon. The heart of the work remains the same. The light must be ready before darkness arrives. And inside this steadfast tower, that promise continues without fail. The final winter night arrives with remarkable gentleness. The wind has not vanished. It never truly leaves a lonely lighthouse. Instead, it moves around the tower in long, patient breaths. The sea rolls beneath a blanket of moonlit clouds, lifting and lowering itself with calm confidence. White foam glows softly whenever the great beam passes across the water. You stand beside the lantern windows and watch the light complete another graceful circle. Nothing about the movement feels hurried. Nothing feels uncertain. The lens turns with quiet precision. The mechanism hums steadily. Outside, distant waves continue their endless conversation with the rocks below. Inside, the tower feels almost alive. Not because it speaks, because every familiar sound now carries meaning. The clock marks another minute. The stove settles with a gentle click. The staircase gives a soft creak beneath careful footsteps. The glass remains clear. The lamp burns steadily. You no longer hear random noises. You hear a place doing exactly what it was built to do. That realization brings an unexpected sense of peace. When you first arrived, every crash of water sounded like a warning. Every gust seemed alarming. Sleep felt impossible. Now the same sounds seem dependable. They have become companions rather than enemies. The greatest lesson of lighthouse life has never been learning how to silence the storm. It has been learning how to live beside it. One important historical fact reflects the lasting importance of these towers. For centuries, staffed lighthouses protected countless ships by marking dangerous coastlines, hidden reefs, harbour entrances, and narrow channels. Their lights reduced the risk of shipwrecks and allowed sailors to navigate safely through darkness and poor weather. Although modern navigation technology has changed many aspects of maritime travel, historic lighthouses remain enduring symbols of careful service and remarkable engineering. The keeper finishes one last inspection before midnight. He wipes a small fingerprint from polished brass. He checks the lantern glass. He glances at the clock. He signs the daily log with calm, practiced handwriting. No dramatic flourish accompanies the final line. Only quiet satisfaction. Everything's in order. That simple sentence carries tremendous weight. The lighthouse has fulfilled its duty once again. You walk slowly down the spiral staircase. Every room welcomes you with familiar sights. The tidy shelves, the sturdy table, the dependable stove, the carefully arranged tools, the blankets folded with patient care. Nothing has become luxurious. Everything has become meaningful. The cat stretches lazily beside the fire before deciding that supervising another evening would require entirely too much effort. It curls into its favourite place without the slightest concern for tomorrow's weather. You quietly admire that philosophy. A kettle murmurs gently on the stove. Someone pours tea into waiting cups. No celebration fills the room. There is no need. Quiet success rarely demands applause. It simply invites gratitude. One quirky tradition recorded at several old lighthouse stations tells of keepers carving tiny marks into walking sticks, wooden boxes, or simple pieces of furniture after surviving especially memorable winters. These were not official records. They were personal reminders that another difficult season had been met with patience and steady work. Historians still argue whether the lasting public image of lighthouse keepers has become too romantic over time. Some accounts celebrate heroic rescues and dramatic storms, while others emphasize ordinary maintenance, careful routines, and long periods of peaceful isolation. Together, those stories reveal a fuller truth. The profession required courage, certainly, but it also required consistency, humility, and extraordinary patience. You sit quietly beside the window. Clouds drift slowly apart. A handful of stars appears overhead. Their reflections shimmer across the dark water like scattered lanterns floating upon the sea. Far away, a ship answers with a tiny light of its own. It passes safely beyond the hidden rocks. The people aboard may never know the names of the keepers who watched over this coast. They do not need to. The light has already introduced itself. You think about everything that makes peaceful sleep possible inside this lonely tower. Not silence, not perfect comfort, not complete safety. Sleep grows from preparation, from routine, from trust, from strong stone walls, from shared responsibility, from carefully maintained equipment, from warm blankets, from hot tea, from familiar sounds repeated so often that the mind finally accepts them as ordinary. The keeper yawns quietly. His work will begin again tomorrow. The sea will continue rising and falling. The wind will return. The lamp will shine. Nothing about that rhythm feels burdensome now. Instead, it resembles the turning of the lens itself. Steady, reliable, patient. The lighthouse stands upon its weathered rock exactly as it has through countless winters. Storm after storm has tested its walls. Generation after generation has climbed its narrow stairs. Hands have changed. Tools have changed. Technology has changed. Yet one quiet promise has remained. When darkness comes, the light will be waiting. You take one final look toward the calm sea. The beam sweeps across the water once more before disappearing into the night. Then it returns again, just as dependable, just as reassuring, just as peaceful. The tower settles comfortably into another quiet watch, surrounded by endless water and an endless sky. Inside, warm light, familiar sounds, and gentle routines continue embracing everyone who calls this remarkable place home. For perhaps the first time, you understand exactly how lighthouse keepers could close their eyes while fierce winter storms surrounded them. They did not sleep because the sea became gentle. They slept because, through patience and experience, they had learned to trust the tower, trust one another, and trust the comforting rhythm of work faithfully done. The storm was never truly outside alone. It became another voice in the night's familiar chorus. And that chorus, surprisingly enough, could lull even the most watchful keeper into peaceful rest. Word count 19. The lantern continues its slow turning. The fire burns a little lower. The kettle grows quiet. The clock keeps its gentle rhythm without asking anything of you. Outside, the sea breathes against the rocks with calm persistence. Each wave arrives, pauses, and slips away again. The wind no longer sounds restless. It drifts softly around the old stone tower like a familiar companion that has finally grown tired. You feel the warmth of the room, the weight of the blankets, and the quiet confidence held within these thick walls. Every careful routine has found its place. Every task has been completed with patient hands. Nothing more is needed tonight. The lighthouse remains awake so that others may travel safely through the darkness. You do not need to watch the horizon anymore. The steady beam continues its graceful circle without effort from your imagination. It reaches across the sleeping sea, then returns again and again, as dependable as breathing. The gentle creak of timber blends with the fading murmur of distant surf. Somewhere nearby, the cat shifts once, decides everything is exactly as it should be, and settles comfortably again. Above, a few quiet stars appear between slow-moving clouds. Below, the tide continues its endless journey around the rocks. The old tower stands peacefully where land meets sea, carrying its light with calm dignity into the winter night. You allow every sound to become softer, every thought grows lighter. The warmth lingers, the sea drifts farther away, the lighthouse keeps its faithful watch, and the night carries you gently toward peaceful sleep. His end of script, sweet dreams,